Okay, and away we go. So, welcome everybody. I shall just run through the introduction and then we'll kick off because we always run out of time. We ran over by about 10 minutes last time, I think, Ben. So let's get going. Hello and a very warm welcome to this Explain Pain in the Clinic. My name is Joanna and I am Director of NOI Group Europe, and I'm joined this afternoon by my lovely friend and NOI teacher, Ben Davies. Good afternoon, Ben.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good evening.
Wherever you are. Ben has been a NOI teacher for well over 15 years, and he has taught hundreds of Explain Pain courses to thousands of clinicians all over the world. He's an active clinician himself, working in the NHS. Ben, will you just tell us briefly what your role is, please?
I will. So I work in Bath in the UK. I work at the Royal United Hospital, which has for many years hosted or run a residential rehab program for a rheumatological condition called axial spondyloarthritis. People come and stay with us for 2 weeks and have a really intensive rehab program, which hopefully sets them up to manage their condition, for the rest of their days.
Amazing. Amazing. I always think what a privilege that is to have people for 2 weeks and for
It
them as
is.
well.
Yeah, it really is.
So these sessions are all about giving you a taste of Explain Pain and how to practically use it in your clinic. Some of you will have already done an Explain Pain course, and for those of you that have, these sessions will reinforce what you've already learnt. But if you're new to Explain Pain, this should give you a taste of the sorts of things that we cover in the core course. So just a couple of things to mention before we start. Ben will be talking for about 20 minutes. If you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A or the chat. I suggest that you put your questions in earlier rather than later, because we often run out of time when they all come up once at the end. So just bear that in mind. And if you want to watch the recording of the session, you can access it in the Clinical Discussion YouTube channel, which has got, I don't know, about 40 or 50 of these in there now. So there's today's session will be in there, plus a lot of ones from previous lives. So I've dropped the link to that in the chat. Please click on through to that and you can find the recording there. It'll be about an hour after it's been done. So today we're going to be talking about experiential learning and how experiential learning can support your pain education with your patients. So what sort of things are you going to be talking about today, Ben?
I thought we'd just have a bit of a chat about what that means, I suppose. What does learning from experience mean? And a bit of a compare and contrast to, I think, how Explain Pain, going back over, what is it, 20, 25 years, has sometimes been considered didactic. What does that mean? Can you tell somebody some new information, and how well does that land with them? Sometimes it lands brilliantly. Sometimes, and maybe more often at the time, it lands a bit awkwardly. And I'm sure every clinician on this call has had experiences of educating somebody that it's kind of gone wrong. The person gets irritated, feels you're suggesting something you're not suggesting, and it breaks that therapeutic relationship. So I think a big thing about EP now is, how do we gauge that with the patient, and how do we have other options than perhaps just a PowerPoint lecture or notes that you're trying to push their direction.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I agree with you completely that there is that sort of, that there has been that conception about Explain Pain, but it's absolutely not that. So let's kick off then with where do you want to go first? The limitations of the traditional approaches, or
We could
somewhere
do.
else?
Yeah, no, we could do, because I mean, Joe, I could ask you something if that's all right. I always like to get you involved. Remind me, what car do you drive, Joe?
Oh, at the moment, I've got a little Audi A1.
A little Audi A1. And what is that, petrol or diesel or hybrid?
Uh, Petrol.
Why did you not get a hybrid car? Because they're much more ecologically friendly, aren't they?
Yes, they are. However, I've had two daughters that I've had to teach to drive in the last 3 years. So we just went for the most sort of simplest option that I would like to drive and that they would be able to drive without it costing an absolute fortune.
But I mean, you could have got a cheaper petrol car that's relatively the
I
same size as an Audi, couldn't you? Why did you not choose that one?
because I wanted something
I asked that
reliable.
question. I asked you that really badly. You could have you could have chosen something other than an Audi. What made you take that choice?
Because I wanted something that I thought was reliable, but also still had some of the functionality of a bigger car.
But you know that actually Audis aren't very high up the reliability scale, aren't they? Fords are much better reliable. If you look at the data,
I guess so, but also I've had Audis in the past, so I'm familiar with them.
so to Joe and to the group, I'm trying slightly badly. I'm trying to persuade Joe that the decision that she's made is the wrong decision. And
Yeah.
Joe being a human being, and as we all are, when someone tells us, inherently, we kind of tells us, I'm trying to tell Joe that she's wrong. What does Joe do? She argues back. And no, I made this choice sensibly. Very few people, when we sort of challenge people, when we kind of say, actually, that's
Mm.
wrong, you've got the wrong idea, you've made the wrong choice. Very few people will go, do you know what? You're right. I should have done something else. That's pretty much just not human nature. So, a little bit in preparation for this, I was looking at the definition of didactic because although I thought I knew what it meant, I wasn't 100% certain. So, didactic teaching, I suppose, is two, isn't it? It's like two people involved,
Mm.
intended to teach in a way that is too determined or eager and often fixed and unwilling to change. So I think what that talks about is my belief. I'm trying to impose my belief in terms of car purchasing on Joe. And
Mm.
understandably, Joe's saying, bugger off. I made these decisions for all sorts of reasons that you don't know about.
Yeah.
So what does this mean for the workplace? If we've got all the clinicians on this call, we've got our understandings of pain, we've got our understandings of the biology, we've got our understandings of engaging the person in your rehabilitation process. If we come from a fixed, determined perspective, we may well be
Mm.
knocking up against somebody's their beliefs, their understanding, their lived experience, and all that information that they've gathered about their condition, their pain, from all those other clinicians that somebody's seen. But there's a spectrum there. Sometimes people will be really willing and open to the information you give them, or the idea that you want to give them, in which case some didactic teaching is perfect. Actually, some
Mm.
ice on that knee would really reduce the swelling likely. Would it? Great, I'll do that. They may well be in a situation where they're very able and willing and open to change. EP is very much about recognizing when people are a bit more on that continuum towards fixed. How do we
Mm.
engage that person? So I've got perhaps 3 examples I was thinking about. And I suppose these are almost, topics within an EP curriculum that we might want to help somebody learn about through experience. So one is pain links to stress. People on
Mm.
this call, if you think about your patient population, there will be the people who you really clearly see that life stresses, not biomechanical load, not tissue pathology, but life stresses have some degree of aggravating and easing factor for that person's pain. But maybe the person's just, well, why are you talking to me about stress? This is pain in my back. Why would I be talking? Why are you asking me about stress? So how can we get somebody to open up to or explore that idea? We could tell them, but a bit like with Joe, the more you tell somebody, the more they're likely just to fight back against you, and you'll end up in a bit of a verbal tussle. So what about a pain diary or a stress diary? Between
Mm.
now and the next time I see you, three or 4 weeks time, whatever period, could you do a bit of a diary? Could you just note what's going on in life? There's noting what was your pain doing. You've got a sense from them already about their sort of fluctuations. What's happening with your pain? Could you just notice what's happening broadly in life? Because there could be a couple of things you may notice. One, no pattern. Life stresses go up, pain's the same. Life stresses go down, pain goes up. There may be no pattern, in which case you as a clinician have learned that actually your sort of gut feeling that stress was relevant was wrong. And the patient's data has shown you that you were wrong. The person may find, some correlation. They may come back and say, actually, I've noticed that when I've not slept so well, when my kids' health is not so good, when work pressures ramp up, this happens to my perception of my problem. It's an experiential way of being able to diarize what's going on in life alongside what's happening in their symptoms. And might that be because that's the person coming up with that, diary, and they're noting the presence or absence of an association. Well, it's their information. They've come up with it. They've learned. And so therefore it's likely to hold a bit more credence than you telling them.
Yeah, I love that.
Ideally, idea number one. And I think just one other thing, like it's not a pain diary. I don't, in many ways, I don't like the idea of over focusing on pain, but for a defined period of time to explore the relationship between stress and pain, there may be an option there.
Yeah, I really like that, Ben. That's very practical and something that you can probably use with most people.
Sometimes it's not needed. Sometimes people say, oh, my shoulder hurts when I do this. Ow. If I do this, ow. If I don't do that, it doesn't hurt. That sort of presentation, we'd be thinking this is more body related. There isn't a link to stress. I don't even need to raise that issue because it's simply not part of the clinical picture.
What would you call it then if you didn't call it a pain diary, just out of interest?
I'd call it a stress experiment or a life stresses exploration experiment. And an experiment as in, we don't know the answer at this point. Let's explore and see what we find out together. I think that sort of language perhaps helps people recognize that you as a clinician don't necessarily have all the answers, but you're on a bit of a journey with them to find out, the breadth of management strategies or triggers and therefore management strategies that might be relevant.
And again, you're moving away from the didactic, aren't you? Assuming that position of authority over that person, that you're on the journey with them and you're on the discovery with them parallel.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really, really, really important. And then that sort of almost power dynamic plays into that, doesn't it? That clinician with all the answers, clinician with all the power.
Yeah.
A second sort of scenario, perhaps. We all recognize, I'm sure, that brains have a significant role in pain. Now, I sometimes jokingly or very seriously say, we've got two options for making you pain-free. We can do it. Medical science can make you pain-free. We could put you under a general anesthetic for the rest of your living days. You'll be pain-free, but perhaps not living a life. We could do a brainectomy and you'd be pain-free. Let's just remove that brain. Now, that doesn't mean that your pain is made up, imagined, hallucinated, but it's kind of obvious without a brain, you'd have no experience. But how do we get somebody to kind of recognize that maybe their thinking process, their brain is part of this complex pain experience? And there's two options here, or there's two ways. One is mental not rehearsal, mental activity that might be an aggravating factor. So if someone's imagining something and you might have picked up some of their sort of aggravating factors or scenarios or challenging scenarios that can aggravate their pain, what if you only do that mentally? What if you only imagine the movement of your knee bending forward to pick something off the floor with your spine? What if you imagine going into a really stressful environment? What happens to your body? And this use of sort of mental imagery, again, we do on the course, I do here with junior physios and students. I'd ask them to relive their most embarrassing moment in life. We've all had them. When was relive that moment that you just wish the ground would swallow you up? If you were to do that, Joe, how does your body feel? Are you getting some stomach flipping or hair standing up on end?
Yeah, instantly.
But you're not in that situation. Now, that doesn't mean that how your body is feeling is not real, but it means the thing that's triggering or, making your body feel in that way was all happening up here. What if you go the other way? Joe, what would it be that you could imagine that would make you feel completely chilled out, completely relaxed? Can you relive a really lovely family holiday? Can you relive a lovely sort of view sitting on top of a hill somewhere, looking out across this, listening to the waves rolling in? What happens to your body if you mentally rehearse calming aspects? And again, there's this exploration with a person, because what I'm saying might be relaxing to me is not relaxing to you. What somebody finds pleasant, not everybody does. So can you almost think about two experiments here? One is to think a little
Mm,
bit more challengingly. Can you bring on symptoms only through mental rehearsal and mental imagery,
mm,
but perhaps more therapeutically? Well, in that case, if you can aggravate it with mental imagery, can you calm it with mental imagery? Can you use mental
mm,
imagery as a stepping stone to physical practice? So you can run the rehearsal of spinal flexion or knees to chest or knee flexing and extending or your hand reaching out and grasping. Can you run that as a rehearsal prior to
mm,
the physical exercises or the functional exercises or the OT, return to activity that you're wanting that person to do?
mm. What I'm always curious about when we talk about this kind of thing is how do you actually I get the sort of idea of what you're doing, but then you've got an individual in front of you and what do you actually get them to do? I got the bit about the experiment diary. Like that
Hmm.
seemed like quite logical how somebody would go away and make notes. With this, what would you encourage them to actually do? Um, whilst they're with you, that's one thing, but when they leave you, how would you encourage them to practice the positive visualization, the pain inducing visualization and the positive? How would you ask them to do that?
So I suppose the pain bit, exploring things that are provocative, perhaps that's only as a demonstration that their purely brain activity has a role in pain provocation. It doesn't really have a
Got you.
therapeutic opportunity, I think, but it's a sort of, well, look, if you can make your pain worse by imagining certain things, doesn't that show that your brain is relevant and absolutely real and absolutely, validating the person's experience, but it highlights to them that their mental processes could be relevant. The therapeutic bit is to practice movement ideas, movement patterns in their brain that are perhaps short of pain provocation. So if you were coming into a clinic, Joe, and you've got shoulder pain and, reaching up, however we try and exercise your body, every movement, every lift hurts your shoulder. What if you were to imagine reaching up? What if you imagine to reaching up, but sort of imagine coming up to short of pain experience? If your physical approach is now being protect the arm, I don't want to move the arm at all because every movement hurts, then okay, keep it relaxed, put that nice calming music on, put your
Mm,
relaxation CD on, but I want you to run in your head the idea of reaching up to stroke a flower on a
mm,
bush, to feel the leaves of a tree, to reach to reach your hand up into the shower as the water's coming down. Whatever imagery somebody
mm.
finds pleasant and secure and sort of safety provoking, but they're using their brain a little bit as a stepping stone towards reduction in fear and reduction in protection, and hopefully an increase then in being able to get into them more physically.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
And just one other thing, I think I'd also highlight the role that imagery has in elite sports. People will be possibly familiar with someone like Tom Daley, the UK diver. You can see
Mm,
him standing at the back of the diving board before the dive, and you can almost see his eyes are closed and he's slightly moving. And what he's doing is rehearsing the thing he's now going to go and do, physically. But that mental rehearsal has a fairly good evidence that it improves physical performance in the elite sports population. If you imagine your cricket shot, if you imagine your place kick in rugby, people at that level will use mental rehearsal in order to
mm.
improve their performance. Well, why can't you and I in the same way, or why can't we advise that with patients who are looking to improve their performance?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's a really great way to understand it with the performance element of it too. Thank you. That's great. So the next one, did you have a
Well, my
third?
third one was that issue of pain equates to damage, and how when people come to therapies and perhaps they're expecting exercise of some kind, that usual, well, quite, you can have the people who under exercise or under move or over protect, but you sometimes get the people the other direction who over push, who push too hard, and that leads to a pain flare up. And I think this part of experiential learning is learning that if you find the middle ground, you can make gains. So the person who flares up and then has to back off, maybe they have a couple of weeks of relative immobility, or they can't exercise, or they can't work, and then because they've had that low lull of life, and they've been away and have been away from the work environment, there's a big long list of to-dos, they then push again. Helping someone to realize or explore that actually moderate is the way forward. It doesn't have to be, however motivated you are, you don't have to go at 100 miles an hour. You don't have to go at 90% of your maximum. Actually, gains can be made by consistency. So graded exposure, this is almost the next step beyond the imagery we were talking about. But when you're physically doing something, whether it's in a gym space, whether it's Pilates exercises, whether it's stretches for our guys who are in our Axbar course, really need to move. They need to keep their spine, all their joints flexible. And a question I'll ask people when we're beginning to introduce stretches is, how much do you think this should, how uncomfortable should this be? Should it be nil, no pain? Usually people recognize that stretches need some discomfort. Should it be painful? Or should it be uncomfortable? Or should it be challenging? Helping people work out that actually if they can work out the moderate level, the degree of stretch or exercise or weight training or Pilates that's enough, but it's consistently done, they will make gains in whatever physical aspect that we're wanting them to do. They'll get a little bit more flexible, they'll get a bit stronger, they'll get a bit fitter. But I think there's two parts to that reason for the physical exercise. Part of it is the physical, but the other part of it is the confidence, the innate brain system confidence that says, I can do this much. I don't need to produce a pain experience at this level. I'll produce it at this level. But if you keep nudging that, then the level that the system says that's enough, I'm going to create a pain flare, almost pushes backwards. So graded exposure, the ability for somebody to hold back and not push with all of their motivation, but just hold back, work at 50%, work at 60%, work consistently, but over weeks, probably months, more likely, possibly years, depending on the person, you'll find the gains. Years ago, we had some pens, didn't we, Joe, that said not no pain, no gain, the NO pain, no pain, no gain. Like if you want to be Arnie Schwarzenegger, it's going to hurt. We had KNOW, pain, no gain. And that no bit to me was always about understanding that pain doesn't equate to damage, but some degree of discomfort is probably required, but you've got to experiment with finding the right level, the right dosage. And I think we can't do that by telling somebody three sets of 10, 3 times a week is the right dosage. 2 kilos is the right dosage for you. 5 kilos is the right dosage for you. We can't always tell that person that. We've got to help them work it out. And again, that's experiential learning for the person to understand where their current limits are. They're sort of short of pain flare, but with repeated exposure and consistency, that limit will rise. And we draw this on this Twin Peaks model quite often. The Twin Peaks model, the pain onset level, nudges upwards over weeks, over days, over weeks, months, years. And we hope to get somebody then essentially self-managing. They understand how to push. But I think it means it's almost taking away your expertise as a clinician to say, let's work this out. Again, let's work this out together. What's the right dosage for you?
Yeah, I love that. You're empowering people, aren't you? You're giving them the tools to get in charge of their own recovery.
People will often be quite scared of stuff. We take people into the gym, and it's not unusual in our course. People say, well, I haven't been to a gym environment for years. I've got this inflammatory spinal condition. Surely I shouldn't be lifting weights. So no, you can. Now, yes, I want you to start as a beginner. If you've got a gym history, forget that. Let's start right back as a beginner. Let's start with a sort of beginner's mindset. Let's underestimate what you think you could do. I'd rather you underestimate, be conservative with a small c, but go again and again. And gym space may not be for you. You may be someone who'd rather do bodyweight exercises at home. a Joe Wicks type workout, for those of you who know Joe Wicks, or you might be a Pilates person. How you do it doesn't matter to me at all. What matters to me clinically is that you're doing something in a controlled manner.
Mm. No, really, that was really good, Ben. Thanks so much. There was so much in there that I know is covered in a lot of depth in the course. But you've just sort of taken us through a whole sequence of suggestions that really do put people in the driving seat of their recovery. And that is something that we are asked about so often, which is how do you put somebody in the driving seat of their recovery? So we've covered not only the experiential learning element of how to make Explain Pain much more powerful, but also also covered how to put people in the driving seat. So that was really good. There was so much in there. Thank you.
No problem.
Would you like to just have you got any sort of parting messages or for the audience on this subject, things that people should be thinking about or focusing on?
Only to highlight that I first saw Lorimer Moseley in about 2003, doing a evening lecture in Manchester Police Station, and the stories Lorimer would tell in the early days of Explain Pain was very much about the science. And I know he would say, and David Butler would say, over this 20 years, it's not the science so much; it's the how do you engage, it's the learning from teaching, or it's the approach to being a teacher. And I think what almost no clinicians, very rarely do clinicians get taught how to teach.
100%.
And that's where EP has evolved over the years. And I think much more we're thinking about, there is the knowledge, and the course does continue to contain the science knowledge, but it's the how do you deliver this in ways that are non-threatening and validates the patient's experience. And like you just said, Joe, very much aims to put the person in charge so they can make informed decisions alongside you as a kind of co-collaborator. And that I think requires some clinical humility and clinical respect for the person.
Yes, I agree. And I hope that everybody's enjoyed listening to Ben today, and he's given you an idea of what it is like to learn. It is about the education, isn't it? And Ben is an amazing teacher, and I found that just so easy to understand, and it was there was a really nice flow to it. So thank you very much. Ben does have a couple of Explain Pain courses coming up. If anybody in the audience or watching this on catch up is interested in doing the full Explain Pain course with Ben, he is an amazing teacher. We get like 100% positive feedback every time we do a course. they'd all bring their friends or recommend it to a friend if they could. So Ben's got two courses coming up. Ben, we've got a 2-day Explain Pain course coming up online on the 17th and 18th of November. And then you've also got a night school course coming up, which is running through November and into December. That's a longer form course over 6 sessions. Would you just explain to the audience briefly what the difference is between the 2-day online and the 6-session online night school?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same course, it's the same workbook, it's the same sort of slide deck, it's the same resources. I think some people, favor a bit of a intense immersion on a 2-day thing. Maybe that's easier for work, easier for life. 2 days, of course, you can get a bit of screen fatigue, and there's a huge amount of information that we sort of look to portray in part across that course. Night school, exactly the same, but being sort of Saturday morning and then 5 Thursday evenings UK time, it gives you that time in between to perhaps reflect and put into practice and play with some motivation interviewing type strategies and see how it goes, 1 week, and come back and share with the group what's gone well and what hasn't. It's just a slightly more relaxed format, but does take up sort of 6 sessions and five Thursday evenings. So it's just what works for you.
Yeah, it just depends how you prefer to learn. Some people prefer sort of slow and steady. Other people like to just go in and get through it and then go away and practice. So anyway, I'd like to thank you again, Ben. That was absolutely superb. And thank you for everybody in the audience who's joined us live today. and we hope you enjoy it. If you're also watching on catch up, don't forget to check out some of the other videos in our YouTube channel. There's tons of topics covered. It's an immense resource, so please go in and have a look around, and thank you again. Okay.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you everybody for
Thanks,
coming.
Ben. Thank you.